You are now watching my super extended version on how to change a radiator valve. I felt my short version and all the other videos I've seen on YouTube, they just don't give it justice. So hopefully this video covers everything which you need to know about changing a radiator valve. Now, quite often though, I come across valves and it is a problem, and you take the valve off and you can't get things apart, pipes don't line up. And in this video, I'm going to explain some of the differences between some of the valves and what you are likely to encounter and how you can overcome those problems if you come across them. So in this video, I'm going to show you all those little tips and tricks to what you can do if you have a problem with the pipe work or anything else. So when it comes to draining the system down, I very rarely drain the system down. I would say probably 95% of the time I leave the system full of water. Draining it down can be a real pain in the neck because when you come to refill it, depending on the system, you might have radiators not working, some radiators working, and then it's a real pain. And obviously you also lose all the inhibitor if there is any inhibitor in the system. And I'm going to show you how you can change this valve without having to drain the system down. And because this will only take me half an hour to an hour and the job will be done. And the system will be up and running again and I'll be out to the customer's house. Whereas if I drain the whole system, it's going to be like a few hours. I mean, it's maybe the whole morning to replace just one valve. And obviously that's expensive and that's not what I want to be doing. If you're thinking about replacing your radiator, then I have a video on how to replace a radiator. You can click in the cards above or in the description below or at the end of this video. Hello, my name is Mark Ballard and I've been a gas registered engineer for over 20 years. The aim of my channel is to help you with your heating and your plumbing problems, from just basic maintenance to the more advanced fault finding and repair. If you're new to my channel, don't forget you can click subscribe to see more help videos. You can click like, share me with your friends, and if you have a similar story or a question, you can leave it in the comments below. Like I say, a big thank you to everyone who's left a donation for Toolbox Fund. That is really appreciated. Now let's get cracking, and I'm going to show you how to replace this radiator valve. As I said in the intro, this is the extended version. Now, to give you as much information as possible, I've speeded all the tracks up by various amounts. So if it seems like I'm moving and speaking really fast, it will be because of this. Right, the first thing I will look for when I come to change a radiator valve is what radiator valve is fitted. Now you can see that radiator valve there, and we also have a thermostatic valve here. These are both relatively modern radiator valves. What I mean by modern is they have a 1/2 inch nut here and a 1/2 inch nut here. Both of these are held on with olives. So you can swap this radiator valve around so you can be in any orientation. So if you want to fit it that way around, you can fit it that way around, you can fit it this way around. It's fairly straightforward. And as you can see, when I take this joint apart, you just have an olive in here like that. And it's the same for the bottom one here. So when it comes to replacing the radiator valve one for one like this, or a thermostatic valve which is like this, you can see you still have the same fittings. You still have the olive which goes in here, the olive fits in there, and an olive that fits in there. Obviously this comes off, and then the thermostat will just fit it on the top here. And now again, you can see how that will fit straight in its place without too much problem at all. Now, important thing to remember when you come to change this radiator valve, I will also look at what is in the floor, because the floor is really important to what you have down. If this pipe is laid into tiles or into solid concrete, that means this pipe will not move. So when you come to push that distance there, that's a short bit of pipe, and you will not be able to move that valve off the end of this spigot here. Okay, and so that is sat in there like that, and you won't be able to pull that pipe back that far to be able to take this off. So the only option there is to actually undo this bottom nut and lift the whole radiator off. But I will show you how I normally would tackle that if this was a concrete floor and this pipe is fixed. So I'm going to show you what you can do. Now, another very important question I would ask is, what type of system is this fitted on? If it's on a combi boiler, then that would be fairly straightforward. I would just literally take the pressure out of the system and then replace the radiator valve. If you have loft tanks, then there's a possibility you might need to drain the whole system down. In general, I don't normally do that. I normally plug the central heating tank, but I'm not going to cover that in this video. But you can click the link in the description below. Before you start to change this radiator valve, I would suggest that you go to your boiler and you make sure that you know how to top the boiler up, and that you make sure that the valves are working even if you do know how to top up, because sometimes those valves can become faulty, they can get blocked up and they don't work. So go to boiler, top the pressure up, just watch the pressure gauge rising. If it goes up a touch, that's all we need to do. And because we're going to drop the pressure down anyway, so it's not going to matter, but it ensures that when you finish the job, your boiler's going to be working afterwards. So I've got my dust sheet down, I've got all my tools ready, and I've got some towels ready, and I've got my vacuum. So the first thing that we need to do is to drop the pressure on the system. And this is fairly straightforward. I will just do it from the bleed point on the radiator, because we cannot take the radiator valves off with any pressure in the system. If we try doing that, we're going to get water spraying everywhere and making a big mess, because it probably will be dirty water. So all we need to do is come to this valve here, open up with our bleed key and let the pressure out. And we just keep letting that out until the water stops. So before you go dropping the pressure, I strongly recommend that you go to the boiler and you isolate the mains supply to the boiler. So switch that switch off on the wall, turn all the electricity off, so that there's no chance the boiler or the pump can run and give you any problems. So all we need to do now is to bleed the radiator. Now this little thing, white thing, these things twist around. People worry about that. They think maybe it's loose or it's broken. This is quite normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point that, and I'm just going to start it off and let it go into the bowl here. Okay. And there we go. Now I'm just going to let that bleed away, and we're just going to wait for this pressure to drop down. And this may take some time, but be patient, wait for the pressure to drop. If I was doing it normally, I would use my vacuum here, and I'll suck the water out, and I'd probably do it from the valve also. That speeds the whole process up, and that way I can remove the pressure really quickly, and there's also no chance I'm going to spill any water because I've got my vacuum there. Okay, there's little tips for you when you're doing this. If this is on a combi boiler and your boiler's downstairs and this radiator is upstairs, then there's very little that you need to worry about, because when we isolate the radiator, then we're going to create an airlock, and the water can't get out. So as long as there's no radiators above this radiator, so there's nothing above it, there's not really going to be any water coming out. So we don't have to worry about about additional water coming out of the radiator. Another little tip is if the radiator's downstairs and you're worried about water coming out when we come to remove this valve, then if you isolate all your radiators upstairs, turn off one of the valves, again, we create an airlock, and that will stop water from what we call flowing backwards through the system and coming out when you remove that radiator valve. But whenever I try and do this, I try not to touch the system as little as possible. I don't want to go turning radiator valves and finally start leaking, because that's another job I then have to sort out. So now I've dropped the pressure on the system. The radiator and the rest of the system is still full of water. So what I'm going to do next is to isolate both the radiator valves. So I'm going to turn this radiator valve off here, and I'm going to go to the other radiator valve and turn the other off on the other end. So we're going to change this radiator valve here, and we're going to put this one in its place. So this is fairly straightforward. As you see, this is just a standard lock shield wheel head valve. It just opens and closes. So what I would do with this one is I would close the valve first of all, because if we don't want any water coming out. So we've closed the other radiator valve. So now again we have created an airlock. I'm then going to take the cap off this one here, and I'll also close this valve here. And then when I close the radiator valve, I'm going to count how many turns it is, because when I put it back again, I want to make sure that I turn it back the same number so the system stays balanced. So let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 turns. Before I go taking this radiator valve off, I'm going to make this valve ready to fit. So what I'm going to make sure I do is I'm going to close this radiator down, this valve down. I can see the valve shut inside there, and that's now shut, because if we take this off and we start water starts coming out, we can easily just bang this on there quickly, and then we're not going to get water pouring out of here. There's nothing worse than putting that on and then you've got water pouring out of here also, where you could have just literally just pulled it off, popped that one on, and then there's no water coming out, very little spillage. So make sure that this valve is shut. Now, I always use a joining compound. I've seen a lot of people just saying, just put the radiator valve straight back on without putting anything on there. I don't know why people would say to do that. I always use joining compound because the last thing I want is a leak, and I'm sure it's the last thing you want is a leak. There you can see that, got a nice little smear of joining compound on both the surfaces where the olive fits. Just want to show you the radiator valve and what you should be doing to seal them and what's inside them, so you know what you're trying to do here. So this is the part which is on the radiator valve. So this is screwed into the radiator, and then we have this little spigot sticking out. Now what holds your radiator valve onto the radiator is just this nut and this olive. Okay, so you have an olive here and you have a nut here. Obviously the nut goes on first and the olive goes on second, and then the valve goes against here. Now I quite often see, or people think, that this nut seals the radiator valve. Okay, they think that this somehow seals it. This is not the case at all. So there is no point in getting PTFE tape and wrapping it around here, trying to make a seal and thinking this is going to do something. That will do absolutely nothing. That is not what seals a radiator valve. Okay, so you're just wasting your time with doing that, and there's no point putting a silicone sealant on it or joining compound or anything else on there. It's not the part that seals it. The part that seals it is where the olive pushes up against the seating on the valve here. Okay, so where that bit touches that bit, that is the part which does all the sealing. It's not even this end of the olive, it's this part here, because when you do the nut up on here, okay, it goes onto there, it squashes that olive into that seating, and that's not what seals it. So when you come to do this, all we need to do, like I said, showed you before, is you just get a smear of this and we just wipe it around the inside here. That's all that is needed. You don't need to get a great big dollop like that and be sticking it in the hole. That's not what's needed, okay? We don't need to be doing that, okay? Again, I see people doing that, and that is not what is needed, okay? Because now look, it's all gone up inside the valve there, and then that's going to get washed around your system and maybe causing you problems. So you don't want to be doing that. Okay, so we're just going to clean that out now. There we go. So we clean that off now. So you can now see that when we have this paste on here, like that, we put a little bit around there again. I've done this a million times, and I haven't had a joint leak due to this. They always seal. The only time it has, if there's something a bit dodgy about the olive, and then I would look to maybe wrap PTFE tape around the olive, and maybe use paste, belt and braces as I call it. But you can see then that will just sit in there, and it just squashes up against there, and that's all that's needed. Okay, if you're particularly worried, you could try putting some paste on here. That's another little trick you can do. So I would probably just maybe put the nut on, or maybe not, just wipe some around here like that. It gives you, again, it gives you some belt and braces. Then carefully put your nut on. Obviously you're going to smear all the stuff out of the way, but then you can see you've got a smearing of that stuff on there also. And then you can put this olive on, and again, if you're really worried, you could just maybe smear a little bit more onto the olive to try and seal that. But like I say, I only ever do that if I think that the joint looks particularly dodgy and I want to make sure. 99% of the time that is all that I do, and that seals it absolutely fine. Okay, another thing you need to make sure of when you're putting this together, I'll just grab another one. I'll just pause it. Okay, lastly, I've just cleaned that all up. When this goes together, this olive does not want to be hanging over the end of your brass spigot. If that is not the way it should be, there is going to be a weak joint, and your radiator valve is most likely going to start leaking, and that might just burst off. So this should have at least 1/4 inch on there, so that when this goes up against there, there's a bit of strength there, and it can't just wiggle around easily. Okay, but ideally, okay, that should be pushed right on. Okay, so that goes right up against there. You see, so that goes right up inside the valve there, and that is the way it should be, and that's the way I like to do it. You can see that the olive is right back inside the nut there, and that means that this valve can't twist. There's no chance that someone's going to kick it, because if it's right on the edge here, someone just bangs out the valve, it might move a tiny bit, and that's it, starts leaking. Okay, I just want to show you this one in case you had this radiator valve also. This is very similar to the other one, apart from this one doesn't have an olive. Okay, this is all that's on here is a flange here. Okay, and one nut. So again, this is the part which is screwed into the radiator. So and then that is all that you see, and then again that just goes onto there. This one has again is quite a tight joint. It is just a brass surface against another brass surface, and I do exactly the same with this situation here. Again, no PTFE tape on there. Don't worry about PTFE tape. It is literally just a smearing of the sealing compound to go on here, or joining compound, should I call it, as it is correctly called, joining compound. And you can see again, see I've got a nice smearing of it around here or around the edge. Okay, and then when we do this up, that goes onto there. Okay, so this will show it up nicely, and we do it up. That does it nice and tight, and then we just nip it up, and then that's it. Again, these joints don't need to be super tight. I mean, you can even see there that that's just sticking in there nicely. And I want to pull it off. You can see how it's completely covered around there in the sealing compound. There's nothing going down inside the pipe there, so there's nothing going to be washing around your system. So this is the way to do it. Okay, so you have this type of radiator valve. That's the way you would do it. Okay. Another way to put your joining compound on is just to smear it around the spigot here. Just put it on the outside, make a nice little ring on here. And then when you put your radiator valve on, like that, it'll then push the sealing compound down onto the olive, and that would make a good seal that way. You can see it's pushed all the way in around there. If you don't have any joining compound to make a good seal here, then you can use PTFE tape, and then all we need to do then is to just run a little bit around this spigot here. So you can just wrap it around the spigot like this. Just a few winds, not too many. Don't make it really tight, because you want it to be able to push down onto the olive. So there we go, there's just a couple of winds there, like that. Just going to snap that off now, like that. And you'll see when I then push this down, it'll then push the PTFE tape down onto the olive. And there you go, see it's made a nice joint inside there. So that's how you do it if you don't have joining compound. If you don't have PTFE tape or pipe joining cord or joining compound, then you could use a good quality clear sealant like this. Here's another little tip for you. Okay, so when I undo this nut here and I take this off, you're going to start getting water. It's going to start glugging out of here. That's quite normal. The water will just slowly glug out. A bit of air will come in, and it gradually glug out. But if you get a bit of kitchen roll, you only need a little bit. Not toilet paper, because toilet paper breaks up. You can just make a little plug that's ready to go, and as soon as you've undone the nuts here, you could twist the valve around and just plug that little hole, and that'll stop water from glugging out. Of course, the other option is I would have my vacuum running, and I'll just put my vacuum underneath and catch any water, or you can have your bowl underneath and just catch the water glugging out. So once again, before I undo the nuts, I check that the other valve is turned off, I check that this valve is turned off, and my bleed valve is shut. And now, all we need to remember here is that this nut here, this one here just undoes like that. Just loosen it. And then we come to do this nut here. Now, the big thing with this one here, we must always support this valve. I've seen people saying about grabbing the pipes and holding it. Don't be doing that. That is not the thing to do. If you grab this and you don't support this valve, there's a good chance that the valve's going to twist and you're going to kink your pipe. You're going to damage the fitting here, and you're going to make a right mess of it. Always support this radiator valve. I always use a spanner like this. You can use other ways of doing it, but the main thing is you support that valve so it cannot move, so it cannot twist at all. And this is what I do every time. To turn it over, gently hold it, and there we go. See, that nut wasn't too tight. And I'm just going to watch out for any water coming out. See how these valves move. Okay, we see we've got a bit of water coming out. So what can happen now is just as I pull this off, there'll suddenly be a big gush of water come out. So just be aware, when you come to take this off, you might get a gush of water. If you're worried about your nice carpet or something like that, again, a vacuum is excellent, or you could just drape a towel over the top of it, just to make sure that there's nothing coming out. But I'm just going to gently wiggle this off, and we'll see what happens. And there you go. See, there was a little splash there. It wasn't too much, but still a little splash. And then you can see what I mean about this. I'm going to try and get that out of the way. Don't know if you can see that, but that there, see, it's just going to continuously run now. And then you've got to keep catching that water. It may not look like a lot, but after a while, that's quite a lot of water, and that's just going to keep on running. So this is where my little bit of kitchen roll, a little bit here, just stick it in the hole there, like that. There. And that just stops the water from running out, and then you can now mess around with this joint here. Now, like I said, this, hopefully, we're not going to get any water coming out of here, but I don't know how much pressure is still in the system. Remember that valve over there is shut, so the rest of the system is still sealed. So before I go undoing this nut, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now open this valve up just gently, and we're going to see what water comes out. Okay, so we've already loosened it, so it's twisting a bit. So I'm just going to hold that valve, and there you go. See, so if I'd have just taken that nut off the bottom, I'd have suddenly got a spray of water coming out. But this way I can just let the pressure go. Again, I would normally use my vacuum here. I just stick it on the end of the pipe here, suck up the water, and it's job done. I try not to keep it on there too much because I don't want to suck out more water than I need to. But before I had a vacuum, this is the way I would do it every time. Okay, you can see that water slowing down there now. You could open this up just to prove that it's fine, which it is. Okay, and I'm just going to shut this down now. We can see that there's a fair bowl of water there, so you just want to be careful with that. I'm just going to move that to one side. What I recommend you do with bowls of water is always go and get rid of them straight away. Go and tip them down the toilet so it's gone, or in the drain outside, because there's nothing worse than turning around all of a sudden and then knocking a bowl of water over. Trust me, been there, done that. You don't want to be doing that. So now all we're going to do is going to just change this valve over. Now again, there was still a little bit of water coming out, so when I undo this nut here, we are going to get some more water coming out. But we know that this valve is shut, so we're just going to take it off, pop it straight back on, and it's job done. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that this towel is wrapped around the pipe completely, because I don't want any water dripping down into the ceiling and maybe making stains on the ceiling downstairs. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that nut there. And you can see I can undo the nuts, I can push it down. Now, if you find you cannot push this nut, this is wedged in place. It's usually because there's lots of paint on the pipe. And then it's a case of cleaning that paint off so you can move this nut out of the way, if you need to move it out of the way. And then you can see now I'm just going to lift this off, and I'm going to see what happens. Okay, so you can see we got a bit of water coming out. I'm just showing you, I wouldn't normally let water run out. Sometimes if I do that, I can just put my thumb on it to stop the water coming out. Be careful, these edges can be sharp, you might cut your finger. But then if that's not the case, we could just literally take that one off, drop it on the floor, and pop that one straight on. Okay, and then do this nut straight back up, and then we're ready to go. Okay, and now we're just going to pull this plug out here. Our little plug, watch out, because there will be some water come out as we do that. So I'm going to try and get this pipe ready just to line back up again. Going to pull that little bit of kitchen roll out. I'll do it carefully because I want to make sure it all comes out. I don't want any bits of paper left inside the radiator valve. There you go. See, it's glugging out there, so I know the water's coming out. Now I can just pick that up and put it into position. And there we go. And then again, when I come to do it, what I usually do is I just nip this up. Okay, now that's ready to go. That's ready to be tightened. So I then put my spanner on here again. I hold that good and tight so that the valve cannot twist, and we just nip this one up. Okay, and the same for the bottom. We don't need to hold the valve now, and we just do this one here up. And there we go. Okay, it's exactly the same if you want to change it for a thermostat. You would do exactly the same thing again. This is the thermostatic valve. Now, so you may not know that every time you get a thermostatic valve, it always comes with these dust caps. Okay, these dust caps are called decorator's caps, and what they do, they take the place of the thermostat for when you're decorating. So rather than putting this on, you put this cap here on. You screw that down, and that would close that valve. So it does exactly the same principle as closing this valve here. Now this one's shut. I can then put some paste on here like that. I'll show you how quickly we can do this. Put that onto there, undo the nuts here. Make sure that one there is shut. We can undo that one there. Okay, and I'm ready to go. I'm going to get my other valve ready. And that's literally how quickly I can change one valve for another valve. Again, if I had my vacuum here, I wouldn't have any mess at all. But just do bear in mind that things can go wrong. Things don't always fit the way they're supposed to. So this went nice and easily, as you saw. And like I said, I've seen this a million times before. And this is a nice, easy radiator valve. The pipe moves are okay. The fittings are okay. So it all goes really smoothly. And again, before we tighten this up, always put our other spanner on here. Make sure the valve is straight. Pull it up against it. There we go, nipped up. And just do the last one. Nip. And there we go. That's that. Then we then take this head off. And we can replace it with the thermostatic head, which just goes on there like that. Okay, that's that one there. A quick bit of information about thermostatic radiator valves. Now you can see on this thermostatic radiator, there are two arrows. These arrows mean that the water can flow in either direction. It doesn't matter which way round the valve goes, whether it goes this way, and it doesn't matter whether you put it on the return side or on the flow side. You can put this anywhere. Whereas these older thermostatic valves, these would only ever go on the flow. See, it has an arrow going in one direction, so this would only ever go on the flow side. So if you manage to get one which has only got one arrow on it, you need to make sure that it goes on the flow and the arrow is in the direction of the flow. Now I'm just going to show you a few of the problems which I regularly come across to do with this joint here, which I regularly see. So I made a couple of bits of pipe up to try and demonstrate that to you. Now quite often different valves have different ways of fitting the pipes, go in different lengths because this is different inside here. Now you could take this valve off the top, get your pipe and you put it on top, and you can see there now the olive doesn't reach up to here where it should be. It should be right up against that surface, but it's not. So that's not going to make a seal. And then I can just about do that up, but I can also see, just looking at it, that this has been done up so tight. Not only has it crushed the olive, it's actually squashed the pipe a bit. So to get this olive off is going to be quite tricky. And once I have got it off, it's then going to be an uneven bit of pipe, and that's obviously not so good then. So the option then would be maybe to replace that bit of pipe, cut it, put a new bit on, or what I would generally do would be then to cut the olive off by using a junior hacksaw. So you can then cut that off there like that, and then carefully file off any marks, make sure it's clean, put a clean olive onto it, and then wrap PTFE tape around the olive, and that would be the way to seal that. But say I wanted to change the nut on the olive, again I can try and get this off, but this is really tight. So what you can do is to get a pair of pliers and just gently wiggle the olive and lift it off. And then once I cut it off, I would then look to put the nut on it. I would then put the olive on the top, and because the pipe is going to be distorted, I would then wrap PTFE tape around it. So just to demonstrate that, I'll get some PTFE tape like this, and hopefully that will take up any of the gap inside there. So I then wrap this PTFE tape carefully around the olive. I'm trying to show you that, again, it's that surface there, the surface which is meeting the radiator valve which does all the sealing. So I try and make sure that I get a nice seal around there by wrapping the tape on it. See, I'm holding the olive still so it doesn't twist, and I'm just putting that onto there. Now, if I was particularly worried about the fitting, then I might even put some paste on it also. So I'll put some paste on here, some joining compound like that. I'd also put that onto there. I give this all a good smear. And again, if I'm particularly concerned, what I call the belt and braces. I then look to also put some PTFE tape on to take up any gaps that might be in there, like that. Okay, and then when I know I got a few wraps like that, pull it tight. Okay, and then that way, when I come to do the nut up, I know that that is going to squash in and give me a good seal on there, because the last thing, again, I don't want any leaks. Cutting the pipe, I can do that, but then I'd end up with a fitting on the pipe, and if there's a little bit of water trickling out, you can't solder with water trickling out. You can't do that. You have to have the pipe completely empty of water. So if you come to your radiator valve, you see a radiator valve like this, with this nut's like this. Obviously that is different to this nut. When you undo this, you would then have some kind of weird olive inside here. So if you come across this one here, then no, you're going to have a bit of an issue taking it apart. It's not going to be straightforward. You're not just going to take one valve off and put the other one on. So here's one here. This is the thermostatic one. You can see it's got this strange nut here. Okay, when I undo that there, like that, you can see it's got this olive inside here. Okay, this olive might just come off. I might be able to grab a pair of pliers and just twist it and pull it off. Let's see if we can do that, shall we? Let's just grab that, give it a twist, and see if it's going to come off. You can see it is actually coming off. There we go. So then I can then take that olive off there. We can take this nut off, and now we have a surface, and then I'll clean that surface up, make sure it's nice and clean with some emery, and then do exactly the same again. Put my nut on, put my olive on, and if the surface is at all damaged, then put some paste on it to make sure you get a good seal. Okay. So another issue you might come up against is that if this pipe is too short, again, some of these valves, they are different lengths. So when you come to put your fitting on the top, your valve on the top, you find it only literally just goes inside the fitting here. And obviously that's not good. We want to make sure that goes right up inside there, so it's got a proper bit of support, and that the olive can clamp onto the pipe like this. What we don't want to be doing is to have the olive halfway on the pipe. So you can't do it up with that like that. Okay, that's not going to work. You need to make sure that the olive goes at least maybe 1/4 of an inch down onto the pipe. You might get away with it a little bit less, but obviously the less it is, the more chance you're going to get of it failing. And obviously under pressure, it might pop off, but as long as it's got a bit of pipe, hopefully it'll be okay. But I like to see a nice 1/4 of an inch at least. So you can see when this goes on here, you hold it in position. That is the amount which you expect to see. So when you take a valve off, if this pipe is then fixed and you can't move it, you then may find that your radiator literally is just sort of missing it, and it's not close enough, or it's only just touching it. So that's another little problem which you might have to deal with. The only thing you can do then would be to either cut the pipe, make the pipe longer, or to possibly drop the radiator down, and obviously then we're going to then start bleeding, having to mess about the other radiator valve, and that will make it a bit more tricky. So one of the things which I need to point out to you, which may happen, is when you come to put this on, you can't see if this olive is making with this surface here. I like to know that this olive is actually touched here and is making good when I'm replacing the valve. So when you do up the nuts here, you can't always tell if that's the case. Now sometimes these nuts are wedged here, and you cannot get them back down the pipe because of the amount of paint which is on the pipe. Now I'm afraid the only thing to do there is to get your pair of pliers, and like you see I've got paint on here, is to just go backwards and forwards on the pipe here, scrape off all that paint, so that when you come to undo the nut, that the nut will slide down, and then you can see that olive nice and clearly, and then you can push the pipe up and into the valve, and then you can see if it's meeting properly with that. If you've got a gap there, that isn't going to work, and even when you do it up tight, it might not pull the olive up and make the seat in. So I always like to make sure that I can see it's fitting into there properly, so that we get a good seal like that one there. See, the olive is tight up against that there, because as I said before, it's the olive disc joint here touching this surface here, that's what makes the seal. It's not the threads, it's not the back of the olive, it's this surface here. So as you saw when I put PTFE tape on, okay, as you can see there, I'm wrapping it around this front edge here, because that front edge is the bit which does all the sealing. Okay, so I've done this again a million times. I'm just going to wrap it around that front edge there, like that, and then as I finish it off, I go around the back a couple of times, just in short. Okay, and that's the number of wraps which I would expect to put on with this TTFE tape. This tape is a very thin tape. It's not gas tape, so it's a lot thinner, and you can just wipe that off. Okay, so that goes on there quite smoothly, and then when we put this onto here, you can see when I push it on, it goes in there nice and snug, and the olive just moves a slightly bit there, and again you can see it makes a nice surface there, and that will just squeeze in and seal that joint good and proper on there. One last thing about PTFE tape. Okay, when you do a nut or something like that, the PTFE tape can twist, so it's always recommended to put the PTFE tape on in the direction of the nut. So in this case, as the nut would be doing up this way, I would wrap the tape around in that direction. And when it comes to an olive, it doesn't really make too much difference, I don't think, because the olive shouldn't really be twisting. But if that's the case, this is the direction which I should be wrapping it around to ensure that when I do up the nut, It's going to do it nice and tight. You can see, again, you can see how that's done. You can see I've done this a million times before. That's a nice fit in there. I know that when I put that onto there, it's going to make a good seal, and that's not going to leak like that. So I just want to show you some valves, they can be different lengths. So for instance, we've got this thermostatic valve, and we've got the lock shield valve here. And we're going to put this lock shield on to see where that one lines up. Now that one goes nearly all the way on. That virtually lines up with the pipe. But when I put this thermostat here on, you can see that it's nearly halfway across the pipe. This thermostat here, that's a little closer. So every valve is different. So you can't just think, okay, this will be a perfect fit on there, because you can see that there, that's just not going to put it like that. You can see that that's nearly half a pipe difference. And like I say, that's not going to fit so well. But what you could do here is then get your junior hacksaw and just cut off part of the spigot, so this valve actually goes further on. You could also try screwing in the spigot even further. And that's what I would usually look to do, is to make that really short. Obviously we still need to put the nut on, and we still need to put the olive on it also, but just be aware that, that this could be a problem for you. So I wanted to show you something else with these radiator valves here with this big union on, opposed to the ones with the two nuts on. Sometimes you can see that this lines up dead center with the pipe. When we change this valve, we find that this doesn't line up. So when I take this off, and obviously I don't want to move this pipe here, we know that pipe then moves around, but I'm just trying to demonstrate to you what can happen. Okay, just trying to screw this. Okay, I'm trying not to move that pipe underneath. Then we're going to put this one on its place, like that. And we add a nut and an olive. And we put this one on. With the nut done up now, you can still see there's a difference. It's not a lot, but when you come to actually fit that, you're then going to have to pull the pipe over, and your pipe's not going to be straight, and it's going to be difficult to get on. So you can generally do it, but you just need to be aware that that might be a bit of an issue, especially if you've got very short pipes and that don't really bend in a setting in concrete. And sometimes some of these are a bit longer, so they stick out even further, so just be aware of that. Now, if you find your pipe is set into a tiled floor or a concrete floor, you won't be able to move this pipe here. So when you undo this nut here, like that, and then you want to pull this off, you won't be able to, because that pipe will be stopping you. And there's a good chance that if you do manage to pull it off, that you might kink the pipe or bend the pipe, and obviously that's not good. So we don't want to be bending or kinking that pipe. So really your only option there is to then lift the whole radiator valve off. Obviously this makes it a little bit more tricky. I would then look to maybe use a cap like this, and then when you can then lift the radiator up very carefully, again with all the valves isolated, like that. You can then lift the radiator valve up like that, and then look to drop a cap like that onto the valve like that. Okay, and then you can pull that back up and do it up, and obviously that will stop any water coming off. And then if you've already loosened this valve here, you can then undo that one. You can twist the radiator valve to the side, and that will allow you to drop the radiator back down. And again, just plug it with your tissue. Okay, so I'm going to put the old valve back on again, just so you know. Even with the old valve, I still put the paste on, or joining compound, or whatever you want to call it, like that. So you get a nice smearing on all the joints. Okay, wipe it off in the towel. I'm going to make sure that's shut, because I don't want any water coming out. I'm going to put a new nut and a new olive on there. And remember, when I pull this out, there's going to get some water coming out. So there we go, put that onto there. And now we can now just put that in on an angle, like that. And we can do that thread up, so it's ready to go. So we can just twist it around and drop it onto that pipe there. Okay, so we're going to undo this nut, like that. Okay, and what I'm going to do is that there might be a bit of water here, because if you've taken a little time, the pressure might move, some water might move around, and we might have a little bit of pressure here, and it might want to push this cap off the top here. So just be aware of that. So have your vacuum ready or your bowl ready. It's not so much you can catch the water here, but obviously if you're in a tiled floor, obviously it's just going to go on the floor and not underneath the floorboards anyway, hopefully. So then obviously I then look to just carefully wiggle this up. I'll just see if I can get any water coming out, just in case. Doesn't appear to be. Beware, there might be a bit of a pressure there. So then I'm going to lift the radiator up, take the cap off, just drop it out the way, and hopefully we can just drop the radiator down straight back onto there again. Okay, one thing you have to watch out for, if you are lifting the radiator up to get it to fit onto there, if it's a very short radiator, there's a good chance that it might cause a leak on the other end, but you don't have an option with this, so it might end up that you have to do both valves, and then once you've done it all, tighten them both up, and then hopefully that'll be good for you. Okay, so I'm just going to do that one back up again now. One big advantage with this style of radiator valve, if this one's fitted and your pipe is fixed into a concrete floor, it does mean you can just undo this nut here, undo that one there, and then you'll be able to just slip this off, because you don't have to pull it out. It'll just slip off and you can slip the other one back on again. Okay, whereas the other style with this one, as you now know, to get this one out, you've got to pull the pipe back, and that's virtually impossible if you have a short bit of pipe and it's set into concrete. And I'm going to replace this spigot here. Now, what we find is that you can use a spanner. I generally use a spanner. This is a 5/8. These tend to be all the same size, so there'll always be a 5/8. And then it's a case of undoing them. Now, quite often these can be really tight. I mean, so tight they just don't come out. So that's quite often why we don't change them. They just leave in there. But if we do need to, it's a case of getting a 5/8 spanner or some way of undoing it. Okay, so this one's undoing now. Okay. And I'm going to do this in situ because it just means it's a bit easier, because it's on the brackets and the brackets hold it in place. Okay, I'm just going to loosen this to a stage where I know it's going to come out. Okay, that's finger tight now. Okay, when I undo this, okay, I'm going to get even more water running out, because now the hole is much bigger. The water will come out of the radiator, come glugging out quite quickly. So I want to make sure that I've got my other spigot ready to go. So I'm going to replace it with this spigot here. So with this thread here, just so you understand what's going on, is this is a tapered thread. This is tapered, so the thread isn't straight. It's not a parallel thread. The thread goes in on an angle. So as you screw the thread in, it gets tighter and tighter, because it gets fatter and fatter as it goes towards the end. This style here, you can see that a little bit more clearly here. I don't know if you can see that, but it gets wider, and so as you screw it in, it gets tighter. So by putting the PTFE tape at this end, that's the bit you want to seal, because when it first screws in, you'll always find it's loose at the very start, and it gets tighter as the threads go further in. So I tend to make these up when they're on the valve, because it just makes it easier. So I want to show you how to put some PTFE tape on this to fit in. So we've got the PTFE tape here. I'll then look to wind it around in the opposite direction to which the threads go. So if you imagine the threads are going to turn in this way, all you look to do is to hold the tape, and as you turn it, that's where it winds it on. So that's the way which we would look to put it on. And like I say, I usually put about 20 winds on, depending on the PTFE tape. So I'm just showing you that's the way we would go, and I put it at the end of this thread here, because this is the part we're sealing it. This bit here just helps us screw it in, and then that's what we do there. So like that, and we get a nice finish, and then we can pull this tight, break it, and then we can wrap it around, and that makes a nice seal. Now, if you want to use the cord like this here, this is a Loctite pipe sealing cord. This is also really good. And I spoke to one of the reps on the store once, and he was showing me how this should be wrapped on. And they recommend wrapping it on diagonally, so it would go over across itself all the time. And they were telling me you don't need to put very much of this, and that's quite true. I've used this, and we don't need to put so much on, but you can see how I'm kind of doing this in a crisscross fashion, so it keeps crossing over. I'm not just wrapping it round and round in circles. I'm going across itself, so we get this crisscross pattern on the thread. And again, I'm trying to keep it at the end there, and then one for luck, and then we just pull it off and snap it off. And this stuff works really well. When it comes to towel rails, I find this pipe sealing cord really good. You don't have to put a huge amount on again, and then what happens is it goes really tight, and then usually the threads will stop screwing up before it goes all the way in. When I've used PTFE tape, quite often this just keeps on going, and the threads vanish right up inside the towel rail. So this is what I recommend, and this is what I use all the time now whenever I'm making up a towel rail. So that's a really good product for that. Now, when it comes to these valves here, this is exactly the same way. Again, you can either use the cord on it on the PTFE tape, and again, I'll do exactly the same way again, just wrapping it around like that. And there you go, that's ready to go, and then you can screw that in. Now, I didn't actually count how many winds I'll put on there, so don't shout at me if it wasn't 20 winds, but that's the way it should look, and you can screw that in, and that should make a good seal. But like I said, make sure this doesn't go all the way in and just stop dead. I want to see this coming up, going tight, and then still maybe one thread sticking out of the radiator. That way I know it's the PTFE tape which has sealed it, and not just the fact it stopped going in, and actually this is still a little loose, because it might take it a week, it might take it a year, but quite often I see these leaking, and I come to them, and whether it's this style or this style, and then when I turn this, it turns easily, and the person who's fitted it hasn't done this really tight. Maybe they haven't put the PTFE tape on, maybe they just didn't do it tight enough. But when you do these up, I like to make these tight, so they go up and they are tight, not nearly tight, but really tight. Okay. Okay, so that kind of covers those wrap-in tape around the spigots on radiator valves. Just wanted to show you the difference between spigots you can get in different radiator valve packs. You can see there's nearly 1/4 inch difference in length. You can also get these extra long spigots which come in various lengths, and they can be really useful when you change an old Imperial radiator. So I just want to show you the spigot here. So you can see it's got about one thread sticking out. Obviously when you push it down, that is nice and tight now, and I don't want to do it too much tighter than that, because I just like to see that one thread sticking out, and that's about fine. That's the way I like to see it. And then all I'm looking to do is to take it out and plug it in there. So just bear in mind, as soon as I put it into here, I'm going to start getting water glugging out. So I'm just going to put a little bung in there. Again, just use that bit of kitchen roll like this. Just poke it up inside here, like that. So that's ready to go. So you'll see as soon as I undo this, we're going to get quite a lot of water gushing out. Okay, but you see it's not coming out too fast. I'm catching it, and we can just put the new one into here, gently do it up like that. There we are. That stopped the water coming out. Okay, now we can now do this up, and then we want to do this up really nice and tight, not slightly tight, good and tight. Okay, this is a joint here that we want to see tight. I can move that out of the way so I don't knock it over. Spill it. There we go, it's getting tighter. There we go. Good and tight. There we go, that's nice and tight. This one here has a union on the end of it instead of the olive. So you cannot fit this radiator valve onto there. That doesn't work. So if you find you have this radiator valve fitted, you'll need to take this piece out of here and put in the new spigot. Now these are done up quite often. They have just a big hexagonal key inside there, so it's just a case of putting a big tool inside there and then undoing it. Now these can be really, really tight, so again, you'd be careful if you come to seeing one of these. You may find that this is so tight you can't actually undo it, especially if it's a very old radiator valve. And also sometimes they don't have this hexagonal shape, but they have like 2 little pins, and this is a tool which I made years ago, and you can see I've got those 2 slots there, and that's for the style where it's just 2 pins and it just slots it into there. Now you can use a pair of mold grips, possibly get in there to undo this if you need to, or some other type of grips, but they can be quite tricky, so just bear that in mind. I need to show you something important about the thread on here and the thread on this one here. Now if you don't put enough PTFE tape on, then this never goes tight and screws all the way into the radiator valve. So that's one way if you can tell if you've got enough PTFE tape on. Now these spigots, you need to just make sure that you don't run out of thread, because what again you can happen is you can screw it all the way in and it just stops because there's no more thread for it to screw in. And again, it may not be tight enough and may not be making a good enough seal, and then it might start leaking. So just see how this one works out. Screw that one into there. And this is where we use our big key. Okay, and you can see with that one, that was gone all the way in, and it's actually stopped on the thread. So I don't know if that's actually tight enough. Obviously there was no PTFE tape on there, but if we had PTFE tape on it, I want to see just maybe one thread still sticking out of the joint, so I know that it's the PTFE joint which has sealed it, and not just the thread which has stopped turning. So I just want to show you these 2 joints on this towel rail, which I've used a pipe sealing cord to seal the spigots. Now you can see there's still just 1 thread showing on the spigot there, and that's the way I like to see it. So when I've screwed that in by using pipe joining cord, the spigot has screwed up in, gone really nice and tight before it's gone up inside the valve, with still 1 thread showing. So I know that's going to be a good seal, and that's the same where I like to see it on radiators also. I like to just see that it goes tight, and you can use string or PTFE tape, but either way you just want to see that 1 thread, so you know it's a PTFE tape or the pipe sealing cord which has sealed the spigot. On towel rails I now always use pipe sealing cord. I find PTFE tape just doesn't quite do the job. So I wanted to quickly mention towel rail radiator valves. Now if you have a straight towel rail radiator valve like this, you can only remove them by going up and down. If the pipe drops down into the floor, that's not a problem. You can just remove it that way. But if the pipe is fixed in the floor, then the only option then is to take the whole radiator off. Okay, which would mean taking these little caps off here, undoing the screws, up there as well, and then lifting the whole tail rail off. That would mean that you would have to drain the entire tail rail, but that is the only option if you want to remove the radiator valves when the pipes are fixed in the floor. Okay, all that's left to do now is to open this valve up and open the other one up, and then it should be all ready to go. But first of all, I would go to the boiler, raise the pressure back up, get it back up to your 1 bar, 1.5 bar, and then I'm going to come back and open the valve here. Now I would open it up the same amount it was closed by. So originally when I closed this, it was 1.5 turns to close it. So I'm just going to open it up 1.5 turns to put it back in exactly the same position so the system stays balanced. Listen for a little bit of air coming in, because that'll just wash out any air inside there. Make sure this isn't leaking, and then we just put the cap back on top, and that radiator valve is ready to go again. Right, that's it then. So I hope my video has helped you. So you've been watching my super extended version on how to change a radiator valve. The fact you've made it this far and you're watching this is amazing. I do hope my information has helped you. If you want to see my video on how to replace a radiator, you can click the link here. Don't forget, you can click subscribe, click like, share it with your friends. If you're feeling really generous, and you can leave a little tip in the toolbox fund, that's always really appreciated. Okay, bye for now, and I'll see you next time.